Hi, my name is Tom Ryan. I work for the educational team at the Appell Center. And as we've been stuck at home with the coronavirus, there's a vacuum in all of our lives, and some of that vacuum is from lack of the arts in our lives. I think that's especially something we're aware of as art educators at the Appell Center. And another thing that being home alone a lot has done for me, and I think for a lot of people, is it can put you into a bit of malaise. Sometimes not having anything to do for a long period of time forces us to face things about ourselves that are difficult, and that's okay and that's good. That's part of what holidays are for, or time off. But having this extend for so long can sometimes leave us just in a place of malaise. And I really believe there's a great power in just starting something. So I want to encourage you. Today I'm going to share a real simple art project, something that I use with my design students at the Appell Center. And I'm going to encourage you to just do it. It's the type of project that you could do with small children, or if you are very interested in design yourself, it could be a very complicated color theory project. So, and the end result of all this will be a work of art that perhaps doesn't have the longevity to sit on your walls for an extended period of time. It could freshen things up for a couple months, or even decorate your fridge. So let's start by showing you what you're going to need. This is a color theory study. So first of all, you're going to need some pieces of paper. I'm going to do 4. I would recommend you do at least 3, if not 4 or 5. If you happen to have cardstock around, that's great. A little thicker paper will hold the paint better as it absorbs, but not necessary. So I've cut mine into squares. That again, you don't have to do. But if you like the way the finished product looks with squares, then I would advise you do that. The second thing you're going to need is scissors, or in my case, I'm going to have a cutting board and a knife, which I prefer over scissors. Next, you're going to need a couple of lids of different sizes. You can see here the lids that I have chosen are about half the size of one another. This is for creating some circles on your paper. With that, of course, means you'll need a pencil as well. And of course, you're going to need color if this is a color theory project. I've pulled some craft paints out that have been hanging around forever, but you could also do this with markers. So don't turn off the video right now if you're thinking, I don't have paints. Markers would be perfectly fine, especially if you're doing this with kids. So I've got paints. I would recommend you need maybe 8 to 10 colors, ideally. And it doesn't matter at this point what they are. If you're very interested in a color theory study and you're more advanced in all of this, then you might become selective about your colors. But right now, let's just say, find some color and let's try to get 8 different colors out there for our project. And lastly, you're going to need brushes, which would mean something to dab your paints in. I've got a couple of old bowls and some water for rinsing the brushes. Before this gets dirty, I'm going to have one last sip. There we go. All right, let's begin, shall we? The first thing we need to do is find the center point on all of our pieces of paper. Now, this is very simple, so don't overcomplicate this. If you can simply make a line from corner to corner and sort of estimate where the middle is, and about an inch there. I don't know if you can see that line. Hopefully you can. But where those 2 lines intersect, I now know that's my center point. So I'm going to do that to all 4 sheets of paper. Great, so I have 4 pieces of paper, each with an X marks the spot for the middle. And now we're going to take this and we're going to use that center point to estimate where the center of the circle is for tracing them. So I'm going to say I got a circle right there. And an outer circle. And I like a transparent lid. If you can see that, it actually has a little center point from the mold. I could put that right on the center. And you can still see my other circle inside of it. So now I'm going to do 4 of these. I would recommend working pretty lightly with the pencil because we want to erase that at the end. Sometimes I forget to tell my students that at the beginning. But if you start with a really hard pencil mark and you indent the paper or you make the mark so dark that you can't erase it, that'll make your finished product look a little more like a study and less like a work of art to hang on the wall for a while. Great, so now we have 4 pieces of paper, each with 2 concentric circles. And this is the fun part. Now we get to paint the inside circle or fill it in with marker and the outside circle with any colors of your choice. Now you can do this just randomly, and I would think if you're doing this with children, just let them pick their favorite colors. Don't try to help nudge them in any direction. Just let them paint. Let them decide what looks good together. For those of you that are using this as a more advanced color theory study, I'm going to let you know where I'm going with this. Something that I've been really aware of over these last 5 weeks is the imagery of the coronavirus. And there's these beautiful images online all over the place. And I started wondering, well, what's the real color of coronavirus? Because it's typically seen as red and green or green. And I thought, well, is that the real color or is that a creative choice? And if it's not the real color, what is the real color? And that question suddenly became full of meaning for me because we're trying to figure out what the real essence of coronavirus is. And so that red and green, as it turns out, is a creative choice. The coronavirus has no color of its own. It is actually such a small particle that even the smallest wavelength of visual light cannot be reflected by it. Thus, it has no color, at least no color to the human eye. So, I say all that to let you know if you're looking at this from a more advanced angle, I am going to do 2 things for sure with the relationships of my colors. I'm going to do a red and green, which they're complementary colors. They're across the color wheel. They sort of, they're both, red is particularly a color that's coming at you. It's a very active color. It sort of denotes alarm or attention. And of course, that's why they chose it to associate with the virus. But then in contrast to that, I'm going to do something that has a great deal of harmony, and that's going to be blue and green, which, as it turns out, they're a very analogous colors. They're close to one another. And they also have a very peaceful relationship, which is pretty neat because we see a ton of green and blue here in the spring. It's a surface of green against a surface of blue. And so I'm going to make green and blue for sure. Those are going to be my colors that are very close in the color wheel. And I'm going to do the red and green, which are very alarming. And then my other 2, I'm just going to take some wild choices. So I'll paint and then we'll meet again after I get these 4 painted. Maybe we'll talk a little along the way. When you're working with complementary colors, know that if they come together, they will mix to something that's very just brownish gray. And again, if children are doing this, they're not going to be as steady, and that's quite all right. Now your children, some of them may be inclined to be upset if they're not perfectly in the lines, or trying to smooth all their brush strokes out perfectly. That's really not necessary. Leaving the brush strokes is part of the personality of the artist, and that's important. That's reflective of feeling and expression. So encourage them to accept what they've done for what it is and not necessarily try to perfect it. To perfect a work of art is sometimes to sterilize it, and we really don't want to do that. So I have my first two finished. I have the one that denotes alarm with the red and green. And I have the one that denotes calm. And that's the analogous blue and green. Now, that's not obviously a pure green. I chose a green that really felt like it was coming from the earth. So I'm looking out here on some shrubs and bushes, and this yellow green is pretty common. If you're thinking about color theory in all of this, I remember when I first started studying color theory, I thought, what is this? It sounded so academic and untapped, and how would I ever get my head around color theory? Actually, I don't know that any of us ever fully will get our head around color theory, but it helps me to think of it in this way. Color theory is the study of theory that's seeking to answer three basic questions. Number one, what is the essence of color? What actually is it? What are its properties in terms of physics? Number two, what is its relationship? What is color's relationship? What is one color's relationship to other colors? What is a color's relationship to itself? What is a color's relationship to not color? What is a relationship of color to the outside world and the things that reflect it? And the third question that color theory tries to answer is, what is the meaning of color? How does it affect us psychologically, emotionally? What does it evoke? Are the things that red evokes, like alarm and pay attention, are they inherent to the color red, or are those strictly associations culturally that we've developed? I think most people would agree there's some objectivity of the fact that red denotes attention by its very nature. For my last circle, since I'm interested in this idea of alarm that we're all seeing in these images of the virus, I'm going to use two colors that are well known for getting attention. They come out of a surface towards you rather than receding away from it. I'm going to use a really bright magenta, which is sort of you might think of it as fuchsia or electric pink. And I'm going to use a really bright yellow. Great, I have all four of my concentric circle studies painted, and as we can see, they're already forming a really interesting relationship. And that's what we're going to explore after these dry. So I'm going to let these dry, and if you do with marker, you could go straight on to the next step. But if you've done it with paint, let them dry fully or you'll have a mess on your hands. And then we'll show you what we're going to do next. So welcome back. I think all of my concentric circle patterns are dry enough to move forward. This next step is where you're going to use scissors or a knife and a cutting board. You remember earlier how we made a line from corner to corner to find the center. we're going to use that same line again, but this time we're going to use it to cut. And I am cutting my circle in half. So now I have two triangles. I'm going to cut it again this way. In order to do that, I need to keep them together so that I can find the two corners. So now, as you can see, I have four triangles with part of a bullseye in them. I'm going to do that to all four plates. And then I'm going to essentially put the puzzle back together with all different combinations of colors to experiment with creating different moods, different atmospheres, different feelings. And this is the point where if you're doing it with children, it's a lot of fun for them to explore the idea that certain color combinations result in certain emotional or psychological nuances. So now you have a jigsaw puzzle of all the same shape, but various colors. And I would recommend that you don't make too many rules at this point. For example, not all the pieces have to be used. The goal now is to recreate circles with different color combinations. So you start just very intuitively. Throw some color combinations together. There's a pattern. Now you can mount this onto another piece of paper or a piece of poster board. I actually have an old piece of wood that somebody was throwing away, and I am going to glue these onto that piece of wood and create a couple different circles with different color combinations, and in the end, well, I'll have something to hang on the wall for a little while and freshen things up. Again, you can put this straight on a poster board, gluing these together. You could glue it like I did on an old piece of wood. You could glue it on a piece of foam core. That makes a very nice wall hanging. Or just tape them together and put them on the fridge. In any case, get some color in your life. And I hope you had fun with this. I'm going to mount this, and I'll let you see that process, and I'll meet you back here when we have a finished product. So there we go, my finished product, my color theory study, mounted on an old piece of wood. I hope that you have enjoyed this video, and I hope it inspires you to do something to bring a little color into your life or your kid's life this week. Thanks so much for tuning in. Until next time, have a great day.